All right, guys, we'll see what you think about this one. So, back in November, remember, Alabama proposed a 14 to 20-inch slot limit on its tournaments on 6 lakes down off the Coosa River lakes. And you guys remember those are some pretty prominent, well-known tournament fished lakes. Um, Hosted events pretty much most of our whole lives, right? And they did that based on a study that showed the negative impacts of mortality and things like that in largemouth bass, and they got problems down there. I mean, it's just the way it is. This goes to prove what I've been talking about for like 2 years here on YouTube about mobilizing your forces, whether you are for something or against something. Okay, I don't live in Alabama, so it's not my juice. Okay, I know what I'm going to do here for sure. In response to this, but that's all I can do. Because, like I said, other than fishing in Alabama and contributing just a little bit when you go down to go fishing and buying a fishing license to fish in Alabama, I'm not from Alabama. So I don't really have a dog in that hunt other than, what's happening with bass, okay, across the country. So they want to institute that 14 to 20 inch slot limit. So what was the response from the tournament fishing community? Of course, they were outraged, but they were outraged on the back end. So they had to play the reactive game, okay? Because the proposal was to go into effect. Well, once they got active and once they engaged in the process and made their voices heard, their voices became louder, plus they had the support of the economic question, and politicians are always geared towards the economic question, okay? And it appears now as if that 14 to 20 inch tournament slot limit in Alabama is now DOA, dead on arrival. It will not be implemented for tournaments on the Coosa River chain and all of those 6 lakes, even though it's warranted. Okay? Now, I want you to think about this. You've been listening to a lot of people talk about what's been happening in my town, okay? What's been happening with all the money and all the fraud and all the waste and all that stuff, which is absolutely true, okay? Alabama spent over $800,000 on this study, guys. Now, you can figure out where that money came from. It came from somewhere. I don't know if it came from Alabama, citizens of Alabama, but I know it also was to address what a lot of recreational anglers in Alabama are pissed off about in terms of bass populations, okay? And biologists are pissed off about in terms of bass populations, okay? And this is the decisions that get made at the political level. So they took a position and then they got so much feedback, negative feedback from a small niche of people, because tournament anglers are a small niche of people, okay? Overall in the general population, and people argue and push back at me all the time on that, and all you have to do is look at fishing registrations of the percentage of people in every state who buy a fishing license versus the percentage of people in every state who own a fishing license who fish in a tournament. You can also look at how many people own a fishing license in the state and how many people have registered a boat in the state, and you can get another metric, okay? A lot of people just go on all the emotions and all the emotional stuff about this, but I'm going to tell you this, okay? This is a win for the tournament anglers in Alabama and all tournament professionals, really, because they come from everywhere to fish a lot of these places like Guntersville and places like that. Chickamauga, it's another one, okay? Nickajack, all that, okay? But at the end of the day, who loses? The bass lose. And I know there are a lot of people who don't care about it. There are a lot of people who don't care about that. There are a lot of people who just want to go out and be able to catch a big fish today in 2025, and they don't care about 2035. And they don't care about 2040. They don't care about their next generation. They don't care about their grandchildren, and that's fine. I don't hang out with those clowns. I don't hang out with those assholes. That's fine. If you got friends like that, that's who they are, and you know who they are, okay? But at the end of the day, this is a short-term political fix because they were worried about the money. Because the argument made to a politician was, okay, we're not going to be able to host these events, and we're not going to be able to generate the money in our local communities that are along the lakes, which is a valid argument. Okay, it is a valid argument. Okay, but they knew, the politicians and the biology and the DCNR, they knew all of that going in when they released the findings of this study and what the impact would be. They already knew all that. Okay, and yet the pressure got squeezed. Like I said, I was not always going to agree with the things I say. Okay, and I understand from the perspective of the tournament anglers down there. They're hot. They're some of the hottest and quality lakes during certain times of the year for events. They're used to scheduling events. They can host events because of their infrastructure. But at the end of the day, this doesn't do anything. And again, when you make decisions like this, and then there's no back end, meaning like, okay, so you guys, no slot limit. So now what are we going to do to sustain our fisheries of larger fish? What are we going to do? Who's that going to impact? Because let me tell you what's going to happen. If they restrict access to recreational anglers on any of these lakes, there is going to be a massive pushback by the recreational side, which is just the average Joe in Alabama who wants to fish with his family and all that during the summertime and all that stuff. There is a lot more of them than there is of the tournament anglers. Yet the tournament anglers, they've got the economic impact argument. The regular Joe recreational anglers, they got a thing what's called the vote. Okay? And so there's going to be an interesting dynamic in the next year or two, because this thing's going to keep going. Okay? Because what's going to happen is these lakes and these fishing populations are going to be decimated and destroyed over time if nothing is done. And you know what happens? And listen, you guys know I love tournaments. I follow tournament fishing, cover guys into professional tournaments, okay? Run a tournament, from a kayak bass fishing situation, okay? I'm not opposed to tournaments, okay? But when you recognize, like they have recognized in a study that cost the state $800,000, that's probably taxpayer money that they're just going to throw out the window now. Meaning they did a study for it to come up with a solution, and nobody likes the solution in the tournament community. Okay, and they called in the big guns, probably from Bass, okay, and organizations like that. All right? And that's fine. But here's the thing that people miss. When those populations start to fall and people start catching less big bass and people start catching less bass overall, the tournaments have the option of, guess what? Not coming. They don't have to schedule those lakes. They can go somewhere else. They can go where the fish are. The people who live in Alabama, that live along those 6 lakes and that Coosa River chain, they live in that. They don't have that option when their fisheries get destroyed. Okay? So there had to have been a compromise, you would think, in terms of maybe the slot limit for tournaments. Or maybe here's a thought. Stop scheduling as many tournaments, Alabama. Like, again, I get it. I know that's a hard decision to make for people, but you can expect now that this proposed plan being rejected on the grounds of what it's rejected by, think how that's going to land. Because wasn't rejected because the Auburn University and the study, the information wasn't accurate and the study wasn't accurate and they didn't figure out they're in trouble in terms of the populations. It was rejected now, revised. Okay, people could say they freaking cowered to the tournament community based on money. They put the money, the short-term money, before the life cycle and the health of those fisheries over the next 10 to 15 years. And that's fine. Like I said, I'm not from Alabama, okay? I don't pay taxes in Alabama. Some of the people who watch this channel probably do. So that those are your fisheries. And if you're cool with this, be cool with it. But also be cool with it in about 5 years when you come on this channel and I tell you that I told you so. Bass isn't going to Guntersville. Bass isn't going to Chickamauga. Bass isn't going to any of these places for Bass Opens or for Bass. MLF isn't going. Why? Because the fisheries have been negatively impacted by the refusal of the tournament community to actually be part of a solution to a process that's going to sustain the populations. Okay? People in the tournament community are going to always complain about catch rates and big fish and whatever. if it so happens, what some of the biologists are saying about this, in the future, you're putting today ahead of tomorrow and your children's and your grandchildren's ability to catch big fish in these fisheries. And it sounds to me like the tournament community, they're cool with it, but they have an out. You don't have an out. They got an out. They can go somewhere else. They could take their money and go next door. They can go to a state that doesn't have, these problems. That was proactive, that did stuff, that limited the number of tournaments, that allowed their fish populations to grow, that eliminated, certain things in a fishery that are stunting the growth of their bass, or they thinned out their bass population to promote bigger fish. That's kind of what happens in some places, right? But unless you guys want to start having tournaments only in Texas and Florida, you're well on your way. You're well on your way. Alabama is not the only one who has this problem, okay? This problem is going to hit other places like South Carolina in the next 10 years. It is going to hit lakes, okay, in South Carolina as well, and North Carolina as well. North Carolina's been overrun by spotted and Alabama bass, for example, that are virtually eliminating the largemouth bass population. So unless you want to have bass and Major League Fishing and professional tournaments going out and catching spots all day long, which don't get as big as largemouth bass, okay. I mean, that's fine, but that's a decision that got made, okay? And so these decisions, so listen to this. After taking into consideration all of the fisheries data collected by our staff, various studies to the tune of $800,000, and feedback from tournament and local fishermen as well as many city and government entities, that would be your politicians, I've determined that the short-term economic impacts for a 14 to 20 inch slot limit outweigh the long-term benefits of a larger size structure of bass population on our Coosa rivers, okay, river reservoirs. At this time, no changes for the Coosa River fishery will be presented to the Conservation Advisory Board for consideration. Yeah. So that's a win. Again, kudos to those guys who fought this, because I can't have it both ways. I can't say that you guys, everyone has to engage at the political level, just for what I support, okay? Because that's not the position that I stand. They got there, they made their voice heard, they put down the facts, they had the backing of the tournament organizations, they had the economic data, to sway these politicians, and that's how it's done, guys. And there's a lesson in there for all of you who watch this channel who are in these states that are having these laws come up that are, that you may oppose, okay? If you oppose the regulation or the law, then you need to engage the process, okay? I personally don't support this one myself. I believe that they should recognize the study. That's the biology major in me, okay? But again, every state's different, okay? And obviously Alabama's not ready for it yet. And the people of Alabama and the tournament anglers in Alabama aren't ready for it yet. And that's fine, but they also have to recognize the risk that they are taking with no action at this point in time, because it's only going to get worse. These things never get better on their own naturally. There's too many environmental impacts now brought to bear on these reservoirs and lakes by men, okay? By us as humanity. There's too many negative impacts. I know where we're from. If you guys are from Virginia, you know what I'm talking about when I say Lake Anna, okay? Another example, all right? The phenomenal fishery, and then, okay? What happened? Humanity, okay? Building around the lake, doing everything, cutting all the grass out, killing the grass, introducing grass carp, introduce all this stuff people want to do because they think it's going to be good for them, and then they realize now they got a house on a lake that no one really wants to go fish anymore. Okay, because that's the negative impact, okay, of what happens. All right, and naturally, the natural cycle of things cannot counteract what man is doing in terms of development and runoff and all these things. And no one seems to really be too concerned of it. They just want to go out and go tournament fishing on the weekend, and I totally understand that. Everybody loves a good tournament. But I'm sorry about this one. I don't think this is going to turn out well, for the Coosa River reservoirs. I think it was, what they tried to do. I mean, some people could argue it's a little too much, 14 to 20 inch slot limit. But maybe too much too soon, too fast, maybe. That's a valid argument. But I think now they need to go back to the drawing board, and Alabamans lost $800,000 that could have gone to something else. Maybe that money could have gone to ramp improvements. Maybe that people complain about ramps all the time. People complain about access all the time. Maybe that money could have gone to that. Instead, it went to studies to help with solutions so that there are fish in those reservoirs a decade from now. As it stands now, there's no solution now to address the problem of mortality and the problem that's happening in fishing tournaments. What I think is going to happen and should happen, and I know some of you are not going to agree, and I know the tournaments aren't going to agree, it's going to cost them money, is every single tournament needs to have a program in place for how they care, maintain, and release the fish that they weigh in. Or you're going to have people, and there's a big contingent of people now in some states that are going to demand that every tournament is catch, weigh, release. There are no weigh-ins anymore. That's coming, guys. And it's coming because of this shit. Okay? It's coming because of this. This will now be used as a reason for other states to point to, see, the tournament community is unwilling to support us in solutions to address the bass populations. Therefore, we're going to allow them to have their tournaments. But now we're going to put regulations on the tournaments. Not the fish, on the tournaments. So in order to get a permit, you now have to be like MLF style. Catch, weigh, release. Catch, photo, release. No more weigh-ins. It's coming. Think about that. If you're not willing to work with the biologists and you're not willing to work with the state, I'm going to tell you, it may not have looked that way in this case, and of course it may not be that way in Alabama. Again, I'm not privy to Alabama. I mean, I could talk to a couple people I know who live down there. Maybe someone should give Chad Hoover a call. He's in Huntsville, and find out what he's seeing on the lakes down there. But I'm telling you right now that the environmental movement and the people that are looking to protect, or I would say restrict. I'm not even going to play it off like it's protect, okay? Because there are some of them that just want to restrict your access. They don't care about the fish. They just want to keep you off the water where they live. Okay, I try to keep it real on this channel, and I understand those people exist, okay? But they're also all people who are genuine about wanting to sustain the populations so we have a great fishery. They're going to be more, they can do that easy. Those guys, they have a powerful lobby. They have a powerful voice to restrict access, and it's coming. They're going to restrict all fishing during spawning, probably in Maryland and Virginia on the tidal rivers, probably within the next 2 or 3 years. You're not going to be able to fish. It's going to be more like Pennsylvania. Why? Because it works. Look at the laws in Pennsylvania for smallmouth when you cannot fish for smallmouth in the spring. It works. That's why they have great smallmouth fisheries, right? Okay? And so people are going to start pointing to those things that are successful and then point to the tournament community and go, they only care about themselves. They don't care about the bass. They don't care about our fisheries. They fish here and leave. They don't live here. They don't care about us. You guys need to stop focusing on them and focus on the people who pay taxes, the people who have small businesses here, okay? I mean, that are here 365 days a week, okay? 365 days, 7 days a week, okay? Here. Now, but when politicians see that economic impact study that says, oh, they're going to lose $2 million or $3 million, or depending on what the event is, or in total, all the, that's a hard nut, okay? And so, not surprised, but at the same time, worried, because those are some phenomenal fisheries. So in the coming year, just keep an eye on how many less and less major events on the down low, major events, opt to not fish there, okay? Because if nothing changes and we maintain the same trajectory, these Coosa reservoirs will fall by the wayside outside of the top 20, the top 25, the top 30, the top 40 reservoirs and fishing destinations for major bass fishing tournaments. It just will. It happens. And if you don't think that the political climate, okay, and if you don't think that how politicians react to rivers and lakes impact decisions, go ahead and ask Bassmaster why there hasn't been an event or Bassmaster Classic back in Richmond, Virginia, which held 4 Bassmaster Classics like back to freaking back in the 80s, 90s, end of the 80s and early 90s. Ask Bass why they've never even been back to Richmond, Virginia. Okay? Sure, they do a little open, or maybe they do whatever on the James River. I'm talking about major event, Elite Series event. Why? Politics, money, okay? And also the quality of the fishing declined because no one was proactive, because James River in the 90s got pummeled by tournaments, including the Bassmaster Classic. And what happened the decade after that? The fishing declined to such an extent, Bass doesn't even really go back there anymore. Ask Bass about that, okay? They went there like 4 times for the Bassmaster Classic. Trust me, grew up in that town. I lived in that town. I was at those classics, okay? I'm just telling you, man, this is his part. You can be a short-term thinker or you can be a long-term thinker. And right now, this decision coming out of Alabama is a short-term thinker. Short-term economic gain that has nothing to do with the fish. It has all to do with money. And Richmond, Virginia made those same decisions, guys. I'm telling all you guys down there in Alabama. The town I moved to and grew up in, they made the same exact decisions in the 90s, and they paid the price. It took 15 years for the fish populations to actually come back to the levels they were in the late 80s and early 90s. Okay? And if you're willing to sacrifice the quality of fishing for your son, your daughter, your grandchildren, and all that, props to you. Like I said, it's your state. I don't pay taxes there, but don't expect people to come to your state to come fishing. If you don't take care of it, you don't maintain it, and you don't, increase the ability for bass to thrive and to draw people a decade from now to those places, because it's been booming. It's been booming the last couple years, no doubt. But you got to maintain that level of mortality and fishing and quality of fish and population to continue to draw people from out of state as well for that economic development. And once the fish start going sideways, so too do the people coming to the state that are providing economic, development money and tax money on sales and gas and food and hotel taxes and all that stuff. Okay? And so, again, check back. Let's check back in 5 years, and we'll see how the Coosa reservoirs are doing.